He used to come in one day a week.
If he doesn't come out of our budget, I don't worry.
Well, you know him. Not so many people know him. I'm impressed that you know so many people in public relations.
When are David, Treves, and...
At 2 o'clock, so I think we should do this part.
Right now.
2:30, yeah, I would do this part. Why don't we, whatever you wanted to do here.
Yeah, I think what we want to do mainly is pick up on the software. Because we were starting to talk, and so far Yosef has been unable to locate Penny. So
I saw Penny before.
Today?
Or very early this morning. But is Penny...
He's been unable to locate him. That's what I went over and checked. But he knows that's his main thing to do right now. That for Penny, either come this afternoon, or if not, we'll get a little piece of tomorrow.
We absolutely must have it.
Yes, no question. Yeah. Okay.
This is
There was
the second reel.
Yeah.
Tape for this now. This is the second reel of a session at the Weizmann Institute on the 24th of April, 1983, discussing the Weizac. Just say your names so I can watch the legal.
Thelma Estrin.
Gerald Estrin.
Aviezri Fraenkel.
Riesel.
Say that again.
Riesel.
Okay. The technology.
Yeah.
That's okay.
And just before we went to lunch, and at the end of that first reel, we were beginning to talk about some of any software that was introduced with the Weizac. And I recall that Wilkes' book, I know I had visited Cambridge on the way, was out at that time. And I guess I was asking what impact it had at all.
You had visited Cambridge.
Huh?
You visited.
I had visited Cambridge on the way to Israel at the end of 1953.
Well, the book was around. I remember reading it. You know, we all knew the book, but first of all, I mean, Weizac assembly language, right? Good. And so I mean, it's not directly, certainly no Xerox company,
no.
But more important that even if you have a library of subroutines, you must make available to the users a method where they can incorporate it into their program, how they're going to call subroutines, right, and how they're going to return from the subroutines to their main program, and all set up a system. In a system where you do not have index registers, you do not have subroutine jump instructions. And I once taught a course on computer organization, and one of the students said it cannot be done without index registers, and so I had to go. I remembered how we did it on the Weizac, and Penny set this up. Penny set this up, and and of course then. We got a library of subroutines and so on. All subroutines were sort of written as though they started with address 0, and then when the program called them, they were incorporated into the program and assigned a true address, an effective address, and so on. And he set up.
This kernel operating system is essentially what he set up.
And he set that up, and of course he himself is going to tell you more about that. He also set up interpretive systems. On the Weizac, this was fixed point, 40 bits of 40-bit words. That was not good enough for many of Pecker's programs. He needed floating point double precision. And Penny, I mean, he wrote it, most of it himself, set up interpretive systems where everything was done in double precision floating. People wrote programs in sort of a three-address system. Three-address system was sort of being natural for mathematicians writing in assembly language.
And then he'd interpret that.
And he wrote a program to interpret this and carry it out in double
Do you
precision
think
floating.
that's sort of like a higher level language before there was
Well,
higher level
it was,
language?
you still had to write down in sort of an assembly language.
It was interpreted rather than compiled. This is.
And actually, Penny actually had spent, as when he comes to find out, some years with the Whirlwind Project at MIT.
No, I think he was in Washington at Bureau of Standards.
At the Bureau of Standards, but also at the Whirlwind
Yes.
Project.
When did he leave the world?
We don't know.
I think he came here, and it was either late 54 or 55.
In the summer of 55.
Summer of 55.
He came in the summer
from
of
51 to
55.
55.
He came sort of he sort of just in time to consult with us on the last details on the I/O, exactly how. I mean, the I/O was not designed and not built, and this is something I consulted with him, how to do this, how would the instructions be to do, and how would be the I/O be, and so on. And he came just in time to talk about
Who
this.
took over the I/O? Did somebody come to do, what happened to like when we left in April, who was in charge of the project?
I
You
was.
were.
There was a lot that was still to be designed.
A well-flying year. So by 1954 or 5, Whirlwind's software was pretty well developed. And it sounds like it had an influence then on Weizac.
Well, we don't know. Why don't you? I
That
think it's better
Penny
to
tells
wait
us
till
the
Penny
better,
comes
that-
and not
that,
spend the time to. Why don't we talk
firsthand.
about what we know? I wanted to ask you a question. I wanted to ask you your interest, because Richard's also interested in how people get interested in various things, and I was and thinking of Penny and thinking about you and you both being Orthodox and so forth. I wondered, is there any training from your early religious training that you think was carried over to programming and to logical design and so forth? What do you think?
I don't know, maybe there might be. In my case, it was maybe in the other direction because of the sponsor project. I used my computer training to apply it to this retrieval system of the sponsor. But as to your question, no.
I meant the ability, the aptitude.
Maybe, I don't know, there's logical thinking, in studying Talmud. It doesn't do any harm.
Well, it just occurred to me when
Yes.
that both of you were interested in programming.
What got you interested in doing those things when you were younger, as a child perhaps? Were you interested in technical things? Logic?
In doing what things?
It's technical.
And all the things you did do, whether it was the Talmud or
Engineering,
science or
mathematics.
engineering or mathematics. What inspired you? What were your...
Curiosity.
What did you do when you were a child? What were your hobbies?
Oh, nothing out of the ordinary, like every other child. Playing ball. Nothing special.
And Svi, what first got you into anything technical?
Well, when I was a boy, I had two major interests. One is soccer football, and the other thing was really physics. Electricity. How does a telephone work? How does a gramophone work?
Where was this?
This was
When?
when I was 12 and 13 and 14
In
and
Germany.
so, yes, yes, but it didn't change when I came here. So slowly I went every opportunity I had to do anything in these areas, and then I was in communications, and during all kinds of wars, I was always in communications, and then I went into radar just as a temporary thing, and then came computers. In computers, I got stuck.
And Svi, you're still at, why don't you say what you do now? And then you're at the...
Well, I'm still mostly now, of course, we are not constructing anymore. But there are two things. One is two things which I have an interest. One is arithmetic, high-speed arithmetic, because some of the works on the golems, really, that was what I was active in, high-speed arithmetic, new methods of high-speed arithmetic, and the other is using computers to build computers mostly in the physical design of computers, how to lay out printed circuits and how to lay out chips. That is logically a very similar problem. And these things, of course, it gets more and more theoretical because we are not building anything anymore. But still, these are the major.
Oh, so you're now into computer-aided design?
Yeah, and it has been for some time. Thelma, what do you remember about what you did with the Weizac
Well,
project?
I remember doing design on the arithmetic unit. Now, until today, I couldn't remember what I was doing on the arithmetic unit, but I must have been making the same kind of changes you were making on the control unit that came about because of the first of all, the tubes were changed.
Mm-hmm.
And then for Chaim's work, you wanted a 12-bit instead of a 10-bit address.
No, but no,
that
remember there was in Princeton they had the Kirchhoff error. And on the one side we had a logical error.
That's right.
Oh, so maybe that's what I was doing.
Big change. That's
I
right.
see.
That was a very major redesign in the arithmetic.
So that's what I was working on.
That's absolutely. I had forgotten about
I
that till
completely
this
forgot
moment.
that. I was trying to remember.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, it was a very small group of people here, which was, I guess, one of the things that made it happen so quickly.
one thing I remember, which is sort of going back to the beginning, is when we left, they gave you a plaque which said Harishon, the first computer, and I still can remember thinking, how many computers is Israel going to have? Why did they say the first computer, and her computer, Harishon. And anyhow, I think that's interesting because I don't think any of us really appreciated, or at least I didn't at that time in '55, how all-pervasive it was going to be. And
you saw it just as a laboratory tool.
Just saw it as a tool for scientific,
solving
scientific problems. And,
one of the things that we mentioned before, actually, Frankowski, because there was a role actually that he played on weekends on keeping the machine running. He wasn't Jewish, and there was respect for those regulations, and actually. He played the role of what's called a Shabbos Goy. I think that isn't that the term that's used?
That's later times.
I have a story about that. I have a story about that. He is now a professor at the University of Minnesota.
Yes.
By the way.
Excellent.
So one day somebody came in here, an who is now some professor in the United States, and he came here and he gave a talk and we had lunch with him. And I said to Lee Siegel, you know, when he was a student, a physicist, he was one of our operators on the Weizac. And Lee says, you must have been a very distinguished group. Even the Shabbos guy is now a professor.
Yes.
I think we might have to describe what that is.
You may not be able to
Goy
read.
is Gentile, and the Saturday Gentile was allowed to turn on the lights, while
In the synagogue.
no, any
Or not
place,
any
it's
place,
any
yeah.
in Israel where buses don't, you know, go on Saturday and so forth. The thing is not to have a Jew do that, turn on the lights, which is against the
What is the rule? What's
the law. Yeah, you might as tell us what the law. Why may we not turn on the
Why
lights
not
on Saturday?
computers?
Well, the whole story with Frankowski, maybe you'll hear from Penny, but the idea was that it wouldn't be turned on the door on Shabbat.
Wouldn't be turned on.
The computer.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
But what?
And Penny insisted on that very much.
Uh-huh.
But somehow Chaim Beckeris got him into, made him an offer that he couldn't resist, something like that. And he sneaked in Frankowski to do that on Shabbat.
And that was on the Golem?
No,
the
Weizac.
Weizac.
The Weizac, but then later, when did Penny come here? It was only
In the
maybe
summer of
3.
55.
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe it was, and when did Frankowski come?
Well,
It took a long time to for Beckeris to convince Penny to
allow
it.
do that. Because what happened was that then also other people, once it's turned on, then other people also start.
Yes, yeah.
It's all right to use the machine on Saturday, but not to touch
No.
it, to turn the power on.
No,
No.
It's also
really.
not all right to use it. But
no, not really.
Make some statement, explain.
like, where does the you know,
Where does that
where's the religious law that emanate about not turning lights on and off on Shabbat? Is that related to not working on the Sabbath?
Yes, it's related to that. And the feeling was if the army computer can be turned off on Shabbat, and also the Weizmann Institute computer can be turned off on Shabbat. But the point was that here people got for working on Shabbat got the salary 3 times as much as 2 times, 3 times as much as working on usual days, the same as the El Al people, and that was the incentive for working.
I see. Okay. What else of import? Because I think, you know, until the others come, we've really, you know, in a sense, covered the essential things about that, the Weizac period.
Well, maybe you might, you know, a thing that you might go into, when we left in 54 and then you were in charge, the next era was the people who brought in the magnetic drum and the input-output, and then I remember
that had started.
but who, Weizmann came.
No, that was another thing. Actually,
That's
George Eisler began the drum.
George Eisler designed the magnetic drum, and after he left and after Jerry left, we completed the construction, and then we made it work. And meanwhile, we debugged everything on the mainframe, and we designed all the input-output,
The paper tape
the
readers.
paper tape readers and the flex house. We got all that set up. And then, meanwhile, Pini Rabinovich came and we got some programs running. And in the summer of 1955, we got some programs running. We got some programs
Using the drum.
Using the drum, and that was a very, very, very slow business.
Yes.
A very, very slow business. Something about milliseconds.
Yeah.
In fact, we could access 1 word per revolution of the drum. A very, 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 very slow business. And the main idea was, my idea was that we should do this. We should do this to develop software, get programs running, because, you know, the core memory was on order. Once that comes in, then we can we'll be ready with programs. But of course, Chaim Peckers was very impatient.
So you had to do his programs.
He made it run 24 hours a day at very slow speed. Later on,
Faster than
it was the fastest thing in town, though.
it was certainly the fastest thing in town, and faster than anything. I mean, no computer that speed was in Europe at that time. Then in December 1955, I went to Los Angeles to pick up the memory.
I think it was in 56.
56 even.
Well,
In June 56, I remember I married on 7th of June 50. This is one of the dates that I do remember. And on the day I married, I sent you a cable for one thing or another. And that was held against me for years to come, that on the day I married, I still went to send the cable.
Did you make 2 trips or 1 trip?
I made 1 trip.
So that was
this was a very, very long trip.
You stayed at the back motel, and every time I pass it, I think of you.
You stayed a long time.
It took 6 months.
Okay.
Because the memory was not ready. The memory was not ready, and it took time, and I worked with them a good deal. I was there when they checked out the Aberdeen memory, which was before ours, and then eventually in the summer of 1956, I came back, and just a little bit later the memory came in on a ship. I went with Micha Kelem to the harbor in Haifa to get the memory. We stayed there all night and watched them unload the ship, and we got our trucks right into the harbor, so that the winches, took the box of the memory right onto our trucks, and we came back.
You have to describe how big this is.
Huh?
How big was it in
memory
size?
The
And how big
memory
was
was a box, you could say, 2 meters high.
Yeah.
That is
6 to 7 feet high.
6 feet high, perhaps same width, and 10 feet long.
And it had how many bits?
4,000 words by 40
4,000
bits.
words, 40 bits. That's what it was. It's I believe 12 microsecond cycle time, some kind of thing. A big memory. On the way there, I also visited Cambridge, and Wilkes was flabbergasted. 4,000 words. 4,000 words.
So this was one of the earliest core memories?
Oh yeah, it was the first commercial
This
core
was
memories.
number
This was
4.
number 4.
They made 4 core memories. It was number 4.
So that's
And
very
the other
interesting.
3
Who
went
got the other? Aberdeen?
Rand got one on the Johnny Act.
Aberdeen got one, and Algon got one. Yes.
How did this light work?
No, they used the vacuum tube, the cathode ray tube memory that was still working when I joined UCLA in 1956.
And the other machines were commercial. Whirlwind didn't have a core memory. They had CRTs.
Yeah.
Oh, so that was why we changed the addressing, was because of the
Because
core
we
memory.
got 4,000
I know it was something,
words.
it wasn't for the
Yes,
part.
from 10 bits to 12.
Why don't you explain that? That's interesting. Why the
Why don't you
addressing
explain it?
was affected by the type of memory.
No, but
Well,
the size of
The
it.
size of the memory.
Well, the size of memory, the memory in Princeton was 1,000 words,
24 words.
24 words. That is
You need 10
2 to the 10. You need 10 address bits. 4,096. That's 2 to the 12. You need 12 address bits. So we had to change the structure of our order code and so on. I mean, this is not
No,
such
in fact,
a big
is in the
thing.
Burks, Goldstein, von Neumann, the original report, they decided they would like 4,096 words was what they wanted for the machine. The fact is, technologically, they couldn't achieve that. We're only able to get to 1,024.
Also have problems because of the way the CRTs worked, that they were flaky and you had to worry about having
That's
yeah,
at the
yeah.
Institute in Princeton.
in Princeton.
And that
we
stopped
no longer
having-
had that problem here.
No.
No,
That's we decided not to go there. We had an awful lot of experience in how difficult it was to select and get a cathode ray tube memory working, and then after that, how sensitive it was to electrical noise. And that was a very strong decision to especially since we had seen the magnetic core technology coming along, to go in that direction at all possible. And then through our contacts, as soon as we found out there was a commercial memory being produced, we went that way immediately.
How did we know that? How did you find that out?
Well,
There was Weizmann's paper.
And so it was from there that you got in touch
And we visited MIT on the way, and in fact we contacted with the people at the Institute for Advanced Study. Willis Ware, you remember, went to RAND.
Oh, he went to
did the
RAND. That's
Act
probably
there.
part of it.
And Milt Rosenberg was the one who had originally come from RCA and worked on things and went out to
Milt Rosenberg.
Telemeter.
Milt Rosenberg worked with Jan Reichman,
And yes.
and then he went out to Telemeter Magnetics.
Company, I think he made
Yeah, MMR.
founded it, or
In fact, International Telemeter was first
It was.
called, and then that turned
What's
into
his
Telemeter
company?
Magnetics.
Yeah, but then he has his own company, Memory. Electronic
EM&M
memories.
is the
and then he in
final
fact came over here.
Yeah, he was very interested in Israel anyhow.
Yes.
He
When the
came on a
memory was
visit.
delivered, he came to help install it, but the day he came, it was already working.
He was interested, and then Werner, that's how Yeshayahu got to the States, I think, the first time.
Perhaps
He
he
went
did.
and worked on it.
Absolutely. When he saw me in the airport, he shouted, "Is it working?" I said, "Yes."
I want to ask another. Why did we leave in '54? What was finished then?
55.
55. That seemed to have been an era that nothing. You were waiting.
We had to
on
get
that.
back. I mean, this was
I
one thing.
think just before you went back, we turned on we had this fireworks, so the sparks flying all over the place, and we turned it
No,
on.
in fact, one of the last things that I got out of Haifa, out of port, in fact, were the power supplies. They came. Remember, we had those manufactured and delivered to Haifa for the system. And it was, I remember getting them out of port was a massive thing.
They were installed. No,
And they were installed.
all we could do is one instruction. We managed to work one instruction, sort of fake it with clip leads so that it would go on repeating and
Yes.
repeating one additional instruction. And this is how we showed it to the whole institute.
Yeah.
This was the last thing. This was as far as we got by our university.
Right.
What about the fireworks?
Yeah, what about the fire? I don't even remember any fire. I remember
Yeah, I
fireworks in
remember.
Princeton.
The first time we wanted to turn on power, I remember before we turned it on, Jerry said many times, before we're going to turn on, we're going to measure the resistance between the different buses. And then the day came and Pickers came in, and Jerry wanted to turn it on, so I reminded him to turn it off again, and we checked, and we found some shorts. So Pickers went out disgusted. After a few hours, he was called back, and then we turned it on. And we had all the shorts that we knew we had eliminated. And when we turned on the thing, the whole thing flew apart. There's lots of sparks. And the second time, Pickers left disgusted.
Some bypass capacitors blew up. Yes.
Oh, that's
You remember?
right.
Okay.
Was the power supply a really hard part to design?
We didn't.
No, these were very expensive.
No, but we-
power.
We did design a sequence of when there would be a power failure to first turn off the high voltage and then the filaments and things
This
like that.
sequencing, we learned was very important in Princeton.
So that the vacuum tubes won't get all burned
Shocked.
out. And,
We had
designed some relay system.
We had a motor to turn on the filaments very, very slowly.
To bring them up.
To bring them up very slowly.
The motor operated rheostat.
A motor, not rheostat, it was really a transformer.
The voltage was a variac.
A motor operated variac to bring up filaments very, very slowly, I mean, 2,000 tubes, every time you turn them on, you're supposed to burn out half a dozen.
Just think if you had a microcomputer, you could have turned up the filaments of the vacuum tube. The microcomputer thing. Only the microcomputers replace the vacuum.
So that's what they'll have when they demonstrate.
I think one thing before we end that it's interesting to stay here is how many hours it ran, and Chaim can fill us in on the problems that he did on it.
Yeah.
But I'd like to know how long it ran. And
it ran for 7 years. But,
for 7 years.
Over 46,000 hours, they say.
No, one important thing that we did on the Weizac is we developed a magnetic tape system. And we had, and at this time, this was one of the first in the world. IBM had a magnetic tape system, but all these university computers, like Illinois, for example, did not have magnetic tape systems, and that. Well, he'll tell you about his matrices, 1,000 by 1,000. He could never have done that without a magnetic tape system. And we designed this and we built this and we built two versions of this. One with vacuum tubes and another version with transistor circuits. And I remember sending.
Who led that development?
I did, and Aviezri did. Aviezri was no longer around. Well, I remember I sent you a letter. On this letter, I had the test program which tests the magnetic tape, and with the instructions.
That was in the States?
Yes, I sent you this thing. This program now works, you know. This the magnetic tapes. No, you were in on it. You were sort of I proposed the design and you checked me.
I think I even vaguely remember you telling me that you got it or something, and then it was like, he had it. I vaguely remember that.
And was there software involved with that?
Well, it was then incorporated into software. Really, Gerald became very, very. He really is the one guy who learned how to manipulate magnetic tapes, and always sitting in, because your read head has to sit in front of the block that you now want always to
optimize, in fact, the sequence.
Always have the next block ready in front of you. He really learned how to manipulate this, how to get this thing organized. And he did this, and he did, of course, on the Golem A, this was much better tapes, and so on, and more memory and all that. But on our Weizac tapes, I believe we were the only ones of all the Princeton type computers who got magnetic tapes.
Yeah. Now, in fact, the machine did run for over 46,000 hours. I know Chaim was enormously proud of a run of over 80 hours without stopping on one of his large computations.
Yes, he doesn't believe that you can sort of take a memory dump and then recover from a memory dump. He had to have his 100-hour runs.
Without seams in the.
That's right.
And that level of reliability really didn't hold for any of the machines I knew of at that time.
What do you think the increased reliability was due to?
Well, I think actually compared to Princeton, was certainly the magnetic core memory and also the robustness of the new tube that had been developed. Those two things, and the continued care, with the other aspects of turning on and off the system.
We had great trouble with our resistors.
With the resistors?
All these resistors. which we had so carefully adjusted to be within 1%,
Yes.
they did drifted 20 and 30% out of their normal values.
Yeah.
Was there any problem? Was that because of air cooling? Was it not good
Well,
air
there
conditioning?
was terrific heat dissipation in all that, and terrific amount of cooling.
Now, every one of the early
yes.
machines and
Big
later
plants.
ones had trouble with air cooling. Was there any time that you remember that you had to make a dramatic change in the air cooling system here with the Weizac? Bringing in new air conditioning systems?
We moved it and built new ducts.
Mm-hmm.
This is something that we did. We needed the room, we moved it, we built new ducts, but we used the same air conditioning system. But this is really, this is really one of the great reasons for the reliability of the transistor, that you don't have this heat itself.
When did you come to the States to go to UCLA in 57, 58?
Yes, in the fall of 57.
And when did Shmuel come?
60 or 61.
61.
61.
Late 61. Yeah.
Yeah, 61. Well, I just guess in finishing, I'm not going to,
I just wanted to ask one other question.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, you mentioned the fact that you visited Cambridge and MIT on the way over, and of course the Princeton machine was an influence. Were there any other machines or work being done other places that influenced directly what you were doing? Were you in contact with others?
During the time of building the project, no. One of the things that we did on the way over is we visited Wilkes Group at Cambridge, and in fact became aware of some of his interest in the more organized structure of the control of the computer. I mean, we eventually came microprogramming approach. And now, in fact, we had discussions in the group here about possible dealing with a microprogramming control, but we decided really just to go ahead with the more straightforward control of the Institute machine. I also visited Booth, who, in fact, he developed some of the first drums that came out at the time. He went into commercial manufacture, and I think we had some correspondence with them during the course of these things. And in France, there was a visit with one other computer group, but more the people who had worked in analog and hybrid systems. And in Italy, there was one machine that was in Rome at the university there, run by a rather powerful professor. And I remember, hearing.
And Holland too, didn't we go to Holland?
Oh yes. In fact, yeah, we also went to the Mathematische Centrum
And you kept on
we
traveling
were,
back?
this
No,
was
on the way
here. Yeah.
Sort of.
In Europe on the way here, but I would say there were minor influences of the other technology. Once we came here, it really was essential not to be creating a new machine. I decided that early, but to make these major changes.
And as you were building, did you have many visitors?
Yeah, well, like, for example, George Eisler was a visitor who stayed.
Right. Peter Wegner was a very young man who is now at Brown University, and he came through at one point. He says that this visit and our discussions together were influential in his, deciding to go on with a career in computer work. There were lots of visitors.
You probably, after we left, there must have been plenty. You don't remember any? Okay.
No. So I think those are the main things. We can go on to the next session.
Yeah, why don't...
Sure. You want to take a break?
Yeah, thank you very much.
I'd like Yosef should be too in the group, Mullen Darby. I think Yosef to talk to me, his impressions.
Okay, sure.
I'm going to make some Shalom. 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 Shalom.
But
I mean, you look
if
exactly the
it's-
same.
You too. If it is for
Fine, thank you.
movie,
Very
then I
well.
know.
No, it's not for movie.
Okay, then it's okay.
It's for history.
She just came from
and
school.
science.
It's story, but and then I see.
So, what's going to happen? What's happening
Are you
here?
probably very, very busy?
Professor
But you still-
Riesel is all-
Just came through.
And he is a political scientist, but he has
But
concentrated.
you've been in the
His
States,
solar
you've got to
pool.
stand for
His
all.
electronics.
Zero.
Not all the time.
I remember the solar prize.
Yes, he says he's related. By the way, this is Richard Charlemagne, Solomon,
When you're there, you water
Yeah.
Shtrikman, and the
Judy, our
Well,
company there.
and working
No,
on
no,
the
she,
history of
yeah,
early
she makes
computers
local
and
area
also
networks.
communications.
And with the
And they
Ethernet, she
decided
has
to
one
do
of the
video archive.
Cupertino.
So that in addition to the written records,
Give-
that they-
yeah,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
something
yeah,
that
yeah,
during that,
yeah, she had a
and
lot
this
to
will
do
just be in the
with,
archives. Scholars who are looking
They
at other
may be
things will
a-
also look through some of the stuff,
a
for their
bridge, a
interpretation,
communi-
and possibly for
they
documentation.
design,
Am I
they
saying all
design
that
Why
right?
the experiment is,
To,
I guess, really my idea, and I feel
to
that a
sell,
lot of more.
they have a communication server, which interfaces lots of terminals to the Ethernet.
And nobody.
So yeah, they have 46
In
people
some cases,
working.
maybe
Yeah,
lecture.
they have
And
venture
I-
capital, it's
Yeah.
very
Very,
interesting.
don't realize you're taking it
I
for
know,
granted.
probably,
And so you read something, you
US,
can tell a Jewish
yes.
joke, the rabbi joke, if you read.
Yeah, very.
It's a good joke, but I can't explain most of the story. You read something and somebody says something.
When you go to
that's something
Stanford,
they
you go to
say.
Xerox.
You see it on tape,
You got to
video,
see,
so now you know what they said, and it's different. So this way,
And you,
anyone
where
who
were you on
writes
your
history can have what
sabbaticals,
they
I
write.
remember?
Once at IBM.
Review and
San
shit.
Jose.
Plus, it's also.
Yeah.
Now it's been a long time.
It's only for Gerald and Thelma, otherwise I would
Yeah, we
never.
through the army, so I
You need to be.
How many children do you have? How old are they? You have 3 sons?
And you,
How old are
it's
they?
only if you
One is
want to
going
take
24,
that you
and he's
will get.
already married.
Roger,
and
turning into
works.
this, you can,
Didn't know what to continue to study after the army. The second
You're
one
going
is now
but then
a
whatever
career
you
officer.
will,
He finished his
remember,
years
but,
of duty
we've been
and
through,
is on
some
on an academic
Right,
track.
right, on a-
He has
I would have worn my
master
wig.
BS in
Where would
physics
have
and
worn my
mathematics.
wig?
That would be real.
Then to get in the army, and he works
So how are things?
semi-professional in the army.
So we
We're gonna sit right now, we're gonna take up too much of the
So-
time.
Okay, so we
And we spent
Let's
the day
You're
and
taking a break.
Xerox, working on reversible optical memory.
let's get
That's it, because Muller doesn't want to spend too much time on that.
let's מה זה, you are always
Yes.
you are in all of them.
Yeah,
So
yes,
what
yes,
kind-
yes,
נכון, אני
yes.
מציע. בגלל האור. So we get רגע, אז מה זה, צבי, אותך מצלמים כל הזמן? רגע, that's not fair. Because, yeah, I mean, he's being videoed all the time. Yeah, he's being videoed all the time.
You know, besides that, tomorrow they're gonna do the Golem, and he's gonna be all through that too.
I see, the golem, oh.
Is it SHT or ST?
SHT. כמה הוא יהיה כסף. SHT
But
צריך
we
לכתוב את
have to
השם.
do a part, but we don't know the part. I want to do 5
I
minutes,
don't
maybe when
ever-
Chaim comes. Then we'll do, he's coming at 4 o'clock. So if you can put
צבי, אתה צריך להגיד לי מה להגיד, אני לא יודע מה להגיד.
מה זה פה?
I'm gonna tell you now.
you're going, okay, as long as somebody
Okay, so tell us also what to say.
No,
wait till you hear the question and then you can figure out what to say.
You got a calling at home tonight.
oh yeah.
But you know, I think
You
I
didn't
saw
reach
him this morning walking up the hill to from the San Martin. Could that not be him? And I thought maybe he was coming from here.
There is no, again, I want to his home.
I'm gonna give you a clue.
There's nobody in his house?
רגע, את הסיפורים הכי חשובים זה צריך להביא את הפולני הזה, מה שמו?
Frankowski.
פרנקובסקי.
Okay. Yeah,
Did you get Frankowski? That's the most important thing.
To you? He's not here. We didn't,
So
would you give your
I
budget?
would just sit as Frankowski. Just turn this around. I'll be Frankowski. No problem. You
You're
have
going
to
to be
have, that's the
Frankowski.
most important
How can you
thing.
turn yourself into Frankowski?
Yes.
What is the rabbinate going to think about it?
Well, that's the most important.
Here, wait, we need...
Frankowski, however, you know,
Here,
all these
David, sit
children are
down.
Jews. You want to know
Mika. Did you see Mika too?
Yeah, he was here.
Yeah.
You have to.
You want to know that all Frankowski's children are Jews because he only marries Jewish women.
How many has he married?
3?
I know.
You know only.
I know only about 2.
נראה שכתוב שם מה השם של ריקי על המצלמה.
היא שלה.
In case of emergency, call Ricky Fraser.
Have you seen her? I've been looking for her all day.
Yeah, I haven't seen her today.
Who's her?
Ricky Fraser.
Ricky Fraser.
Here.
זה חיסכון, I need a white. I see you act according to our new administrator, you save money by writing on both sides of the same page.
That's right.
Yeah, right. Oh, that's
You have a new administrator?
You know, when we were checking out the Golem Bee, at one time we were so down on money that we didn't have any computer paper for print out for debugging.
Really?
I went around and got all listings to print on the other side. Yes, so we could go on with debugging.
Yeah, but when Dror was here, we thought that he was bad.
Yeah.
My goodness.
So really, let me just, give you an idea. So this is establishing video archives. It's just for history. It's going to sit at MIT. The collections about these early works.
Would you like to explain?
No, you're going to explain this. And what will happen is that people who are writing about this early periods, and I imagine is the same thing going on in communications, or is it only in early history of
I'm
communications?
the only one doing this. As far as I can tell, no one in the entire country.
So this
Who
is
pays for this?
There's a grant. Was a grant.
If
from the
magnetics
Sloan
was more
Foundation.
important to the world, maybe they do it for magnetics. Is that
Oh,
what let's get to the bottom line.
Yeah. There was a grant from the Sloan Foundation to the Ithiel de Solapool, who's a political science professor at MIT. And Richard Solomon is his associate and producer of this work. It's about 2 weeks or so ago that Thelma and I were asked to come up to MIT with a few other people from the Institute for Advanced Study project. And we, sat around and talked about some of the things that we recalled, and we did recall some things together, which we wouldn't have done otherwise. And this was just put on videotape. They're not making a movie, as I say. It really is for people who are researching that history to come back and spend whatever hours they want to do looking at things. This is one thing I could never understand about audio tapes or anything else. To go and sit and listen to hours of that work, or to look at hours of this work, I can't imagine doing.
Except if it's a PhD, doing his PhD.
Ah, you got it. Or somebody writing a book like Richard. I mean, he has a personal incentive to write a book on this.
Also, there is such a thing as fast forward that you could stop.
Yeah, future technologies of emerging.
Now, one of the things, of course, with the Weizac development, the first people I saw upon coming here were you people.
Why don't you wait till that's on?
We'll wait till.
We still would like to have a release, and you can read
You
this.
can read.
Simply that MIT is not going to allow anyone to copy or redisseminate the tapes without permission. They just can't go in the library and copy and walk away with it.
Well, this you want me to sign something?
I'll tell you what it's
Okay.
on.
Well,
You want to sign it with that.
that's all right.
If anyone wants to use the tapes for broadcasting or commercial purposes, they have to get your permission. They deal with you, not with me.
If you're on it.
To use anything that's on that. If anyone wants to use it for scholarly purposes, to look at it and then write a book, that's what the library is for. That's up to your lifetime or the next 15 years, whichever comes longer. And after that, 100 years from now, we don't care what they do. There'll be a television anyway. So that's the general agreement.
Is it enough if I sign it with a pencil, or do I need a pen?
Yeah, pencils.
Lawyers accepting.
Yeah. So and that was because some people are concerned about their privacy. You don't want to find this in the middle of a pornographic film.
Unless he gets
He doesn't want it.
Perhaps the other way is around. A date, what's the date?
24.
Would you like to be around when the film is made?
Now, I think as far as the the content of this is concerned, there were really two principal things. First of all, anything that you can recollect as far as your first impressions upon hearing of this project, about what it was. Thelma raised the question about why you weren't in the middle of it, why you decided not, to do certain things for a time and to go on to other work in your career, because that gives it a little, significant flavor. It's of interest.
People decide to work on
and
it.
then the other thing is from what you have, and what was different in Israel, as far as this was a project took place here, and what felt to you as different in Israel, and if anything from your experiences later of the impact of this particular computer project on what happened later in Israel, anything like that would really be what appears on the tape. And the thing is, when you first speak, is to introduce yourself, your name, where you came from, if you came to Israel from the outside, just a little bit of that, because there'll be no typing or anything on the film. It's just what people hear and see. And so, are you ready, Richard?
Anytime you're ready.
Okay.
And so what, you will then ask us questions?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm the moderator.
He's the moderator.
The conferencier.
Yeah, that's it. I learned even a new word now.
What's the new word?
Conferencier. So, Muller, why don't you, introduce yourself and say when you came to Israel? Yeah.
Okay. My name is Shtrikman. I came to Israel in 1934 from Poland, and came to the Weizmann Institute in February 1954. Yes. After I graduated from the Technion in electrical engineering.
How old were you when you came?
When I came to Israel, I was 4.
4. Okay.
Yeah. And the reason I came here was simply because I was looking for a job, and
Yeah.
And I had although I at that time had an offer to stay in Holland. I was working for Philips. I mean, I was so stupid to not to accept it.
You mean after you got your degree, you went to Holland?
After I got my BS.
Yeah.
Or not BS, was it BS?
Engineering degree.
No, engineering was later. We got a BS.
Yeah.
Then I went, there was a student exchange program. I went to work for Philips. I worked there for several months. And before I went there, I actually looked around for a job. I talked to various people, and I also got somehow to Professor Frey, who was then Dr. Frey.
While you were in Holland?
No, while I was, before I went. And he told me that, I remember he accepted me in this small room where there was the electron microscope. I don't know if you remember.
I remember, yes.
Yeah, and he said that there are 3 possibilities that one can consider. One is to work in instrumentation, the other one is to work on computers, and the third one is in research. And I didn't know what a computer was.
You know what an instrument was?
What an instrument was, and he said research. well, this may not be that accurate because it's a long
So
time ago,
process.
but and as I recall, he said that after a while one can, the research is the highest of all, right? And after a while one can go to it, but one has to start in the other activities. And I think I said, but I'm not sure anymore. I didn't know what a computer was even. I didn't know. Didn't say anything to me. So I suppose I said instrumentation, and that was it. And then I went to Holland, and from there I corresponded with it. And then when I came back, eventually I was hired, and well, that's.
And this was when you came back.
That was in
This was on
February,
on the 20th of February, 1954, and you came later.
No,
No.
we were here then.
You were
First, we
here
came
already.
December 26, 1950.
But you see, nothing was getting started because everything had to be
I see.
imported and people
And I'm
had to be
even-
hired.
I'm even questioning that date because I think I saw you very early.
No,
it's
that
possible.
is early,
No, in fact,
February.
In fact, it's very, very possible that who I first saw in the lab was David and Amika.
Right.
Yes.
Amika was even before.
Amika,
mine.
yes, yes.
He was, okay.
Why don't you introduce yourself, David?
My name is David Treves, and I came from Italy when I was 9 years old in 1939, and my family came to Rehoveth, and my education followed very close to Mullah's, both, I guess, in direction and in...
Did you know each other in the time?
Yeah, we
Yes.
studied
That's what
together. Right. And I came directly to the Weizmann Institute after my graduation in '53.
How did Fry find you?
Well, I was familiar with the Weizmann Institute because during my army service, I spent some time at the Weizmann Institute before that in 1950. I did some work in instrumentation in chemistry, in cracking with Immanuel Zinkin. So I was interested in chemistry at the time, but later on I switched to electronics. And I came to the institute with a specific purpose of doing electronic instrumentation. That's what I wanted to do, and that's what I told Dr. Fry that I wanted to do, and that
And he didn't even give you the choice. He knew you were in instrumentation.
right. I didn't mention at the time anything, as this is in the summer of 1953. And I remember we were in this big hall
Yes.
where Shaul Maybaum was.
Yes, the
We were
corner.
in the corner doing an NMR.
Yeah.
No.
Not
He
quite.
was
That was at
not
the end.
doing NMR at
It's
all.
big.
This
That
was
came
much
later.
later on.
Right. What
He
was
was
it?
working on semiconductors.
Oh,
That's
right,
Aviezri
it's growing is
yes,
right, growing. Got mixed up. Sure, I remember
in this little room.
in zone melting.
Yes.
Right.
Where is Amakan? Just one thing. I didn't
He's
see.
around the institute.
He is at the institute?
Yeah, I
Yes.
told.
Oh, we didn't.
I gave him.
I thought maybe he
Yeah.
wasn't in the country because we tried to get him.
So when
Isn't
did
your-
you first hear about? So when you first heard about the computers, when you were given a choice and you know what he was
Yes.
talking about. Yeah.
I didn't know what it was. I think I might have even asked. I don't remember, but maybe I was even afraid. I just what's that? And
Yeah, I
This
remember
was
now.
something strange. When did you first hear about the computer project? You remember at all?
I can't, there isn't a specific
Yeah.
date or an event. I think the first people that started to work on the computer there, I knew that Fry was supposed to work on the
So
computer.
he had been away at the end.
That
of Princeton.
I knew, but I don't think he hired anybody in our to do work
I
on that.
don't think he really meant that we be involved in that.
Because he himself was not.
But I remember talking to you and always asking you. Now, when you said
Yes.
instrumentation, we had discussions, and I remember talking to you, and you were always, the two of you were like
Yes.
always together. And you were telling me, no, you were in instrumentation. You came to do instrumentation,
Yes.
and that's what you wanted to do.
Yes, but I think also you see what it was quite interesting, and then this computer project very, in the beginning in the noise, but then got a lot of priority, and we were then already doing something, and I remember, I don't know if I was annoyed, but I saw that, for example, in the workshop, remember, we wanted to cut some ferrites and so on, then they made all these chassis and bending and
you couldn't get things done.
No, we couldn't get things done, but I don't think I was ever exposed to the computer project in the way of a presentation or something, but it's just so that, I mean, I knew that at some stage I knew that both of you are building a computer, and I knew that Fry was somehow supposed to be involved, but Fry was somehow reluctant to be involved.
Yeah, let me, even my first memories, we were brought here, and I was brought here to help build a computer. Fry had been, and we'd worked very closely at the Institute for Advanced Study, and really done a lot of work on debugging and doing everything with that machine. And he's the one who asked me to come and help. And it was a big surprise to me when I arrived that I found out that I was to be in charge, not just to help. And that Ephraim now, as we recollect, he says he always intended for me to take charge, but that this was his indirect way of, of doing it.
He has a lot of indirect.
That's right. That's right. I believe that is true. As I think back now, at the time, I was furious
because nothing was done when you came.
Not only nothing was done, but I wasn't helping. He wasn't. He said he wasn't sure this project should be done. And the first party I ever went to, there were professors from all over, and they said it was the most idiotic thing in the world for Israel to do. But then I found out, if it was going to be done, I had to do it. And the one thing I remember, our first meeting, was I asked, where are we going to build Weizac? And Pekris and Fry brought me in to where Amikam was there, and I originally, my memory, had thought both you, but maybe not. Maybe it was Amikam, maybe...
When was that?
I would say January.
No, so I was
we weren't there yet. And this room was full of, people who were working there from 3 departments.
Right.
Yeah.
3.
3 departments.
But it couldn't be full. I'll just tell you who the people. Tzvi wasn't there yet.
No.
Right?
No.
So I'll tell you who was there. Mika was there.
Yes.
David was there.
Yes.
Amikam was there.
Now, Amikam was working for the electronics department.
Yes, but in this big hall.
That's still one department.
But then there were other people.
And then there was Shaul Maibaum and Pekaritz and Benjamin Abeles, who were working in the what is it, southern more or less corner, but there was kind of an annex with a room that had doors.
Yes.
I could see the instrumentation.
Yes, but there was some kind of
and no technicians except Mika, right?
No, the only technicians were. So in all that, and when I came, there were no more than 6 people in this, and my bomb was generally not there. It was hardly to be seen.
But all I was told was there were 3 departments, and I said, "How am I going to build a machine here?" And Chaim went said like this.
and I think and Fry was somewhat unhappy about what was happening, and I felt he wanted to keep us working in things other than the computer.
I think this is true, but also you people we had discussions, and I think we were very helpful, actually, not in
I did nothing.
Yes.
Come on.
To me.
Maybe I was helpful, psychologically.
But you never thought you were a psychiatrist or anything like that? Well, what is true, that the one thing that had to happen was that Mika had to move, and I don't think you guys liked this. I mean, he was the only technician.
Right.
And in fact, this was the one thing he had to dedicate his time to the computer.
So that he couldn't do things for you?
No,
because Well, a matter of fact, we didn't really have much to do.
Well, in 1955 already there was this milliammeter that was, and this,
But we're talking now the beginning of
This is
54.
right, in
54,
very little.
54.
He helped with the things with.
He helped a little, he repaired things and he built some.
So it wasn't
things.
so terrible.
But we really didn't have. I didn't even have an assignment to. You see, I didn't know what I was supposed to do. I used to come and in the morning, just wander around. Maybe this is why I talk. And then used to go and see David, and David was working on this milliammeter, which was the.
This is also because I didn't have any assignment. I think that under assignment I only built in all my life one instrument. This was a microscopic, which is 60% mechanics and a little bit of electronics, and that's it.
But Mika built. I think Mika built
the power supply.
The power supply with the Worley Bridge. It's called the Worley Bridge. Yes.
How many papers have you published?
Well, one in that period on the instrumentation.
Well, I'm talking about in your life.
Oh, in your life.
And
Many.
how many have you?
Also many, but
So
you see
maybe
when
it doesn't matter.
no,
Maybe
well, the question is what is important. But at the time, I didn't really have. So I used to go to David and ask him what he was doing, and he was working on this milliammeter, and I used to go to Fraenkel and said, what am I supposed to? What should I do? And I said, well, we talk about it tomorrow.
Yes.
And the only thing I did for the computer was, I remember I designed, and I think, I forget, Mika actually built it. You bought those resistors,
right?
And there were 5%, if I remember correctly.
We had to select.
And you had to select 1%. And there was this kind of stoutish girl,
Shoshana
Rosenberg. And I didn't build, I just built a breadboard for that, and Mika built it finally, and she then used it actually to select thing, and this is the only thing that I did for the computer.
It's a very important project. It was critical.
Maybe, but this is
Rosenberg.
a lady. She was sitting
very
then.
ugly and
Not so ugly.
Very pretty, but she was heavy.
She was wider than taller.
Before she took that job, she was working.
Yes, she was the sponger.
This was something I felt
Don't you
very
remember?
good
And she
about.
was riding on the bike.
Yeah.
She
On
used
the
to wash
bike.
the floor.
Yes, she used to wash the floor, and she was at the corner, sitting in the corner there, more or less
She
in
was
the
a very nice
area of where Aviezri was, and she did this.
And then later she got into card punching.
Yes,
things,
yes.
So this was actually kind of important.
So this is the only thing that then we tried something. For example, I don't know at what stage. Then we worked with George Eisler on trying to make heads
for the magnetic drum.
for the drum.
That got you interested in magnetism.
No, what got us interested
you know very
in
well
magnetism.
that, because
Look, most of what we are telling has nothing to do with the computer.
Oh, that's fine.
So I'll tell you what got us into magnetism. What got us into magnetism. Fry may be a little bit mad, but what happened is that...
Let me just add, these people are
renowned scientists
from their contributions to magnetism.
Yeah, but what happened was simply, I used to go to David, and he was working on this crossed field something, and
second harmonic magnetic amplifier for measuring DC currents for the computer.
That's right. Now I see.
Yes.
Okay.
And I didn't have much to do, so I tried to understand it. And then one day I went up there. I didn't really had nothing to do. I just wandered around talking to this and that. So one day I walked up to the first floor, and there I saw the doors of the Goldenberg Library. And there were, this fantastic leather, and which doors are.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I looked at it. I was scared. I said, "Can I get in? I can't." I said, "I pushed a little bit, so it's completely empty." I went in, and I was not a couch.
Chair?
A chair
With arms.
like this,
That's right.
armchair. And I saw all the books and all these books, with leather bindings, the old 1900th century. So I said, I took a few and started to look at them. And every morning I went directly to the library. I just sat down there and I browsed the book. Eventually I found some books on magnetism. And I started to read through those. And then I used to come to David and say, well, maybe we can make some model and optimize that. And we didn't understand. David and I myself, we didn't understand anything of all this physics because we never studied it.
Really?
You see, but I remember
in those days.
I remember I found some review of magnetism. It started with exchange, that ferromagnetism is from exchange and electrons and wave function. We didn't know that something like a Schrödinger equation exists. It's nothing. So I used to sit there and read and read and read and read. And all the magnetism is just due here to Fry's millimeter. I mean, all that you have, that's absolutely true. Yeah. Oh, and to the fact that I had nothing to do. And I used to go to the Goldenberg Library and it was so quiet. Nobody entered, nobody went on. It
was an unused resource.
Because everybody went there after work.
No, it was a fantastic thing. And now, several years, or quite some time ago, I went once. They have remodeled it.
So you became the theoretical expert, and he was doing the experiments, and then he
No, I did also experiments. I remember nagging you once about permeability. I was amazed that you were patient enough with me when we first understood how does the transverse susceptibility depend on high fields. Very trivial thing. And
at that time we didn't understand.
Yes,
later on we even wrote papers on that.
So I talked with you about this, and you listened.
I know something about it. But listening is probably just enough.
You listened.
Yeah.
Well,
that was related to my PhD area.
But I didn't know that.
So you did do a little something. So you did something to measure the. What were you measuring in the power supply?
This was this big machine that had these millions of wires going from here to there and all across. It was a problem to measure the current on these things. So this was a device, a clip-on probe.
Measures the magnetic field around.
Right. And
who assigned you that?
Fry. This was in 1954. Late in 1954, maybe even in the beginning of 55, because something like that. That became my master thesis later on.
See, that's an interesting thing that happens in a way. Scientists who don't like technology, and many of them don't want to have anything to do with technology, but not only does the new technology let you do new science, but in developing technology, all kinds of scientific questions come up that feed the scientists. I mean, the fact that you
aren't answered in the books.
The fact that you had to make that kind of measurement.
But later on, I mean, that was just a trigger. This millimeter was just a trigger. Okay. And what we did later is not really completely relevant.
Of course. But you could ask, like, why did you start with magnetism?
Yeah, right.
Why did you
only because of, from my point of view, only because I saw David working and I talked with him and and there was a problem of understanding what's an hysteresis scale.
Yeah.
All right, but let's assume you had not tried to measure, to make that probe, the magnetic probe.
Using magnetic materials.
You might have gone into something else.
No question.
So, it's a funny
I'm remembering talking to you guys about the magnetic cores and in fact the hysteresis curves that let you store ones and zeros or things like that. So while we were here, did that have any interest? Did you find magnetic core memories, things like this? They didn't change a thing.
No. The involvement. I mean, these things take incubation. right? And it's only because we dealt with this device for a long time.
That's right. That
then we got exposed. A one-time conversation like this is not enough to expose you really to the problems.
Also, it is quite interesting. What happened is, you see, essentially what we wanted is some way to describe the material so that we can put it into the equation of the device. Right. And then we went, so we had to have some kind of a model for hysteresis. Okay. So I looked at one paper, another paper, and eventually we did find things in the literature which we didn't understand. Later on it turned out that rightly so. And so we developed our own way of doing these problems. That we solve this problem helped in no way whatsoever to the hysteresis of that, because the models are models of hysteresis often, but very non-realistic for the ferrites. But they were, it turned out, realistic for other things. And it is very interesting. It went then very, very quickly, because on the first day of the Sinai campaign, I remember this very well, we sent in a letter to physical review letter. So this was 56. Now imagine, I came here in February 54. It's a little more than, it's a little more than 2 years. And of course, what we
were
did.
doing nothing most of that time.
And it was all really physics, it was nothing with it. Now, in the meantime, I think I hardly got any assignment, but there were several things that I did. One is that thing. The other that I mentioned, the sorter.
Yes.
Another thing was something for Schneur-Lifson, which was some kind of a light measuring device, and he was really never I used to always call him to come and see, and if it satisfied, then he didn't never came. And then there was another thing that I did, was something with the photochromic, some kind of control device for the light intensity.
Did you ever get involved in the photochromic method?
No, not
So in other words, your job really, you were supposed to do design instruments for the scientists at the Weizmann Institute.
But we hardly did.
Yes.
We sometimes did some repairs, but also rather not. We simply didn't.
So then you went
much.
off eventually and became scientists yourself.
Yeah.
By default. We didn't have much to do, and eventually the way I think we have also maybe David, but mostly I myself got involved in all these things that we were involved in so many years, is because they came to us one day and said that I need to have a PhD. And Adas was already born by that time, and I was scared stiff about, losing that job. Sure. And what will I do? And in Israel there was practically no industry, and Riesel could always get a job because he was very good at this and a very good technician. I said, what could I do? So I really started and the interesting story so that they said, you have to, in Hebrew it sounds different, but a PhD, you have to be a doctor. And for me, a doctor was a physician.
Right.
You see?
Yeah.
Go to the doctor, right? Also in America, you see. So I just the whole thing didn't make much sense to me. The doctor. The only thing I recall is when I was a young boy, we had somebody from the town from Poland that I came with. My father used always to call him Dr. Orchov.
Yes.
But he was not a physician.
Okay, so you had
physician,
a case.
no. So, and I always asked my parents, how is it that Dr. Orchov is not a physician? So then I got really worked up, and I went. I went to the Technion.
What year was this when you say had done?
This was in 1957.
So 57, they said if you
No,
fraud,
it was before that. It was before that because I already submitted my master in 56 and I didn't do it for fun. But
David, no.
So
you
you
were
said
very well organized and you went and you applied for what reason I don't.
Because after
So
I
why
was
didn't
there a
I
year
do?
or two, you see,
You learned
I
that
wanted
you
to
get
do
promotion.
right. I
Not
came.
promotion. Who cared about
They
promotion?
would have
About
followed us.
I
tenure?
see.
The real reason is the following. At that time, there was no engineer at the Weizmann Institute. So they gave me a scientist grade. And I was a junior scientist, what it called. We came here
Yeah,
as
we were
junior
called
scientist.
Junior A.
Junior A. All right.
First we were junior
And once
B,
you are
then
in that
became
track,
junior
you are in a scientific
No,
track.
you were
And
first junior
there
A
you
and then
have.
became
You
junior
have
B.
to
have
get
a PhD.
you need a PhD. So we were trapped in that silly thing. And so all of a sudden they told us, unless we get this degree,
You're going to lose your job.
Right? So fortunately, I had worked in this milliammeter, so I could turn that into a master thesis rather than Mula didn't have anything like that, so it was in a tighter
So he
spot.
had to go to the Goldenberg Library and look for something.
No, but this happened to be independently, and maybe, one of the reasons that I know that I didn't want to work on the computer, but later on, and was one thing maybe I was a little bit afraid that there here we can fiddle, and there, either it works or it doesn't. And the other thing is that I presumably felt that my chances of getting a PhD, are rather slim. You see? So, and I also know that Frey really, maybe he never said, but Frey didn't really, and he always thought about the space, right, and the people. He kind of wanted, I think, to have a research, a small research operation, and also with time he also didn't want us to do so much of the what do you call it? Not the service and the repairs.
So he wanted you to get a PhD.
Yeah, he pushed us.
Because he wants to make a
himself was
scientist, and he was
supposed to
right.
do instrumentation for the other
I think
scientists.
his assignment. The
But
assignment
he
of the
didn't want it. But he really didn't want to.
I don't know about
He
that.
also wanted to have.
Yeah.
He probably didn't want to do that. He wanted to be a scientist,
I
which
think
he is.
that's it.
Let me
Yeah, I
ask you
think
though
you're right.
now the following thing.
That's my estimate.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. He wanted to do both. He thought that he could pay his dues by doing some instrumentation, but at the same time he could
Set up
develop his own idea.
Yes.
Did either of you ever use the computer?
The computer?
Weizsack.
Not only, yes, of course.
Amikam did.
No,
We did
wait.
too. Oh yeah, the equations were so
Wait,
numerical.
I mean, a computer for us, that it's all our career and the existence, I think, of the Department of Electronics is not totally, but it is partly based on a solution of a differential equation, nonlinear differential equation. We did on the Weizac, and the only computer that I can program is the Weizac by a machine language, and I learned it and I could do it. Yes.
So this is when you were getting your PhD?
Well, this was
On the way.
it was before.
So where did you finally get your PhD?
I got it a fait accompli. You see, I went to them and said, I have a small girl. And she will starve, and here is what I did, and eventually they said, okay.
What?
Ollendorf
Oh, Ollendorf.
was our mine, yours too, right? Yeah, only.
When
He
did you
never
get
knew, he
home?
didn't even know what
You didn't have to take any courses?
Well, he didn't, but I came, I didn't have a master's.
Right.
He had a master's, so somehow he went to them. Now, for me, they asked me to take all sorts of courses, and eventually, it was a big problem. Eventually, I was examined
Technion, yeah.
for 8 hours. I don't know if you remember. and I had an exam, 8 hours, written exam, and I had to know 3 books. One of them was Ollendorf's Die Welt der Vektoren. With all the, and you know, what doesn't one do for a living? So in the evening I used to study all this covariant and contravariant and contragradient. You know. And I passed the
and then you
exam.
taught courses. Was that after?
No, we did. Hardly. No, not during your time. Oh, I did teach some.
You gave a course.
No, I gave a course on information theory.
Right.
That's
Where?
I'll tell you what happened.
Yeah.
I remember it was Dale Pollack, you remember?
We haven't mentioned his name.
He emerged. He wrote to me about 2 days
Dale
ago.
Pollack
Yes.
was the head of our department, actually. And he was, all sorts of problems used to come. We hardly saw him. Once he came to me and asked me, do you know anything on information theory? And I said, well, very little. I think it's very interesting because I heard once a lecture. I didn't understand much. He said, okay, so you give a series of talks to the signal corps.
That's what I
Honestly,
remember.
Fantastic. I didn't know anything about it.
So you had to
And
go
he
into
said,
the Golden Library and stuff?
and I said, yes, and I said to him, but I don't know anything. He said, I have to go tomorrow and that's it. 5 lectures.
That's what I remember.
You remember that? I went and I sat and I gave 5 in Sarafend.
And you learned a lot.
Oh yes, I
Did
knew.
they learn anything?
Yes, they learned, and Noach Amitai was there, one of the, and this was about a year after I graduated. It's a beautiful subject. I remember I found a book by Shannon in the mathematics library, and there was no book whatsoever, except for Shannon.
Yeah.
There was, later on, there came a book by Brillo, and maybe it appeared before that, but it wasn't here. So I remember teaching this Pierce tube. How do you pulse code? Pierce television. Yes. And I even got paid.
Borrowed a book from me by Goldman.
But this was not.
That was later.
This was later. When I gave the talk, it must have been 1954.
So it shows what
That's
it
right.
Goldman
It was
Information
very
Theory.
early.
I remember Goldman Instrumentation. There was a book on instrument.
No, that's one of the first books, right? Information theory. You're right.
Yeah, I do want to switch one. I want you, to sit back really as people who have lived in Israel now in this time and as scientists. In any way, if you can think about what the impact of this Weizac, was on the country. Anything you know about, not the kind of stories we read in the newspaper, we can all that, but anything you know about which would positive or negative impact, on Israel.
I don't think I know anything that I can go to the, to court.
No, not court. This is not court. This is not
Like this,
and you can't be sued.
like this guy who went to the dentist, and so before. Then he said he has to take out his tooth. He said, okay, but first you have to swear.
Yeah.
They take the tooth only, nothing but the tooth. So,
Well, look,
No, we're
but
not
it's
in
the
that.
kind of thing like, for
but
example,
I can tell you what I used to say years ago.
All right, fine.
And what my feeling was, but it is really, I can't.
Completely subjective.
It's completely
Patrick.
subjective.
Okay, yeah, but
I
that's all right.
think it has had a tremendous impact in the sense of the introducing Israel to the use of computers, the application of computers, in much quicker,
very early.
very early in the stage. That's it. very realistic. I think in that I see the main, the fact that without it maybe our paper would have been a little bit, and I must tell you, but that's interesting about the use of the Weizac for our work, because when we published our work, and this is really still today maybe the best work that came out scientific from the Department of Electronics. They independently, same time, some gentlemen in America did rather similar work. And maybe I can even find all the printouts, the letter said that he sent me. And he came to a completely different conclusion. You remember the question of when the magnetization switches, does it switch all the way or is it an intermediate? And this was based on some IBM.
He did some computation.
Computation and a computer. He was working for 3M. And he got a conclusion which was completely different from ours. It's a little bit interesting from a mathematical point of view.
His model was different?
No, it was exactly the same equation.
Numerical computation.
I'll tell you why.
American computation results were different.
Yes,
they
but
led to different conclusions.
you must. It's quite interesting because we had to solve a differential equation with some initial and final condition, and then it's non-linear. So we chose the initial condition. We chose a slope and then looked at the final. And eventually it turned out that the solution, the true mathematical solution, is a step function. Now, we started to, we worked with the Weizac, and then we saw that we have to come closer and closer and closer. Eventually, we didn't really get to the full separation, but it so very clearly led to that, and we could never reach. We even did double precision at the time. Now, what he did the same, but he did get some solution that did satisfy his boundary condition, and we did in conjunction with that, it appears in our paper, we have shown those solutions. I think they even appear in the paper, but then we could show analytically with a hyperbolic tangent that the solution actually converges to this step function. Now, I still have somewhere what he sent me, and in the beginning he didn't believe me. So it was not only numerical, but to a large extent.
Was it after you published your paper?
No, before.
Before. So you mean when you sent it for review?
No,
How did he know about your work?
He knew.
We sent him a preprint.
I think he got wind of it.
And he might have been a reviewer, of your paper.
He was a reviewer of our paper, we know.
But he was a very nice guy.
So he didn't throw your paper out in public.
No. Fortunately.
So we owe it as much to him as to the clipboard with the amateur.
But there's no question that we were doing better with the Weizac, maybe not only because of the Weizac, I don't know. And he's not such a bad, he's quite a guy.
Certainly not at calculations.
He's very good. He must be now 80 and retired, living in Minneapolis.
What impact did your work perhaps have on magnetic memory and magnetic tape design later?
Peripheral. I mean, it may have had some impact, but the techniques used are used today in analyzing some.
Well, why don't you? Maybe you can say in a couple of sentences or whatever what the major result of your magnetic work is, or what is it that you can't do that very well.
It's a little bit difficult, but maybe I'll try to answer what you say. I think if you take. I recently looked at a book on the physics of magnetic recording. there you find not only references to our, in fact, this paper that we are talking about, but also figures that are taken of them. So we have there, I mean, discovered magnetization reversal processes that up to this date are believed to take place in magnetic recording
It's
mediums.
really a description of how the magnetization
Well,
changes.
then how can you say, if you're reading a book on magnetic recording devices and it has your pictures in it, so how can you say you didn't make a contribution to
It
that?
says
Yeah,
peripheral.
to the physics, well, I don't know if it's
Physics of
peripheral,
But
but
that's
the
the
basic
science, that's
physics,
the knowledge base that people need to design.
there's no
So
question.
it was, very.
This is not
But if you ask the other way around, if this paper and this
Wouldn't have
research
been
would
written.
not have been done, neither by us nor by Brown, which is this other gentleman, would magnetic recording be different? I have some doubt about
Yes.
it.
But it's in the
Yeah,
same
but
sense
it's-
as the question about computers, because there's no point, at some point, there would have been a marketplace for IBM as it
Right.
became. It has to do with the, early knowledge
Yes.
and the way, people build.
No, but it is still being used nowadays
That's right.
when people now talk
It's
about
still
going
fundamental.
from
No, it's a fundamental contribution.
it's a fundamental contribution and it's used all the time in an attempt to analyze the behavior of tapes and their limitations and so on for whatever it is worth.
Yeah.
Well, but that's very, I mean, that's
There's no
what
question.
science is all about.
Yeah,
It's
but
filling
it-
in knowledge gaps and adding to the knowledge base. I mean, maybe some people make an original, everybody's not a Maxwell. It's not Maxwell.
But if you compare this, for example, if we don't talk about digital tapes, but of audio tape, this to the contribution, I think, of Marvin Kamaras, who invented AC bias.
Yeah.
There's no comparison. The impact, maybe the intellectual beauty, etc. It's
Yeah.
different.
But I would say, you're saying if it's a fundamental contribution to the physics of magnetism and understanding it, that's
Also to the physics of the very materials that are used in magnetic recording.
to
That's
understanding
true.
the magnetic,
Yes, that's okay.
the domains,
The domains, the particles.
In
It's,
particular to the aspects of fine particles, in which
Yes.
So, Svi, do you remember any involvement with these people that they don't remember what they say is the valid?
Well, I remember one thing, that Muller said, one day he said, no, you're going to be a large group, let's have a seminar once every week. And I was the first elected to give a talk on servo control. That was my hobby at that time. And I gave a talk how it was the moment you saw that you went in and stopped it. No, we have to get this computer built. No more seminar.
I didn't expect such
Wait a minute, who said that? No more seminar. I stopped by that. Lord knows what might have been discovered in that seminar. All right. I think that's, essentially the session.
well, okay. I hope it will be enjoyable enough for the
you don't know how
guy.
much you contribute to magnetic recording.
Well, this is true, but
And now-
I don't think we have really contributed anything to the computer. In fact, maybe we even, איך אומרים, הכנסנו מקל בגלגלים, we put a wrench in the work. There were problems, I remember, of space.
Yes.
And with
Yeah,
Parag,
but
you
also-
remember Parag?
Yes, Peltier.
Yeah, right.
Yes.
Oh, that's who he was.
Yeah, that's who he was.
And presumably, also, I guess
The only
it must have
male
been also a
secretary
little
we
bit
had.
his money.
Yes.
And
We ate up all the
No,
money.
we
We ate up all the money. This is the thing.
No, we had money.
Oh, that you had more being associated with the computer, you
No,
mean?
no, we had, I don't know, we had from Fry.
We didn't have any
We
money
didn't have
because we
flyers
didn't
to
need
come.
much money at all.
No, we used to sit and order things, don't you remember? Fry used to say, well, now you order this and
I
that.
think we
So
still
we
have drawers
GR.
full- drawers full
GR.
of all old resistors, big things like this.
No, because we had an idea on how should a lab look. You have to have standards, for example, resistor standards.
Yes.
So we
So
took
you wanted
the
to make it a
GR.
respectable instrumentation laboratory.
Yeah. So
Well,
we
of course, the standards lab
And
is
what
part
did
of
we
it.
see at the Technion? This old
Yes.
junk.
so we got the catalogs, and you see, I remember once Fry told me, you know, you order resistors or something, so, and he said, how much is it? I said, $400 or so. It can't be that much. I said, but I looked up the Radio Masters, and it's all, it's exactly like that. And we were discussing, and he said, well, okay, bring me this catalog and show. Let's look. So I said, well, you see here, that's what I said. Oh, you took the list price. That's the price for. As I said, what should I take? He said that the net price. I said, what's the difference? He said, well, net is for Jews, list is for Goy.
Why don't we have, like, what are you now? What are your titles now? You're a professor of...
Applied physics.
oh,
Yes.
you switched.
No,
You couldn't be anything else.
you had
So
No,
now
I
you're
know.
also a professor
We
of
could
applied
call
physics.
yourself whatever you want.
Yeah, but this is as
And you're
dirty
head
as
of
you
the
can.
department now of
You're
applied
head of
physics.
the
Yes.
department. And what do you
Oh,
work
no, we
in
are
the
still called
department?
Department of
You're
Electronics.
oscillating.
No, I just replaced David. He was 1 year away, so I was.
And you were at Xerox.
But when now it is different. The Weizmann Institute. Once it was almost.
It was an hereditary thing.
Not hereditary. That's not. Well, it passes from father to son.
Yes.
So you see, I was always head of our
And
department.
he had two sons. You were like the Siamese
No,
twins.
but now they change.
And where is Ami come?
Rotating.
Is he
He's
in your
also in the
department?
department.
And what does he do?
He's
What's his
is
field?
still involved in the same thing that we then did in 1956, 1957.
I remember I had
What
to,
is
you
that?
talk about the seminars, I had to put a stop to his blowing glass figures all the time.
What was
He was learning.
Yes.
What was he doing in 50? What was he doing?
He was he then joined in at a later stage after we did the first steps in this magnetization processes study and micromagnetism, and it really made a very quick impact. Then he joined in and he did work. Now we very quickly quit. I think in
59 we started.
50.
No, I could a little bit, right, but when I went to Bell Labs in 60 it was all over.
yeah, we moved to other things.
And he's still trying to.
And he,
No, he evolves in other things, defects, problem with defects.
but essentially he solves more or less the same equations and that's
Okay.
so.
Good. Thank you.
You know what I've been doing at Xerox? I mean,
What?
working on magneto-optic memory.
But that also, you were there.
Right. Whenever I'm in the States, it turns out that it's so crazy. Right. You know. And I think that now the situation looks more practical, and it's a more ripe field. If there is a market for that, it's a different question. The Japanese have been working very, very hard.
In magneto-optics.
Reversible optical. This is high density magnetic memories. And you know, half the development work in the States in memory devices is in the optical memories, non-reversible.
Yes.
These archival type memories. And there is practically nobody except Xerox that does any work on reversible optical memory.
And the Japanese.
And the Japanese. Any big company that you name has a large effort, more than 10 people and some more than 50 people.
But do the Japanese have already something on the market?
Yeah.
No,
Yes.
Well, that was
nothing on
something-
the...
that was
Sharp.
something that just came out.
No, the only company that has a piece of hardware,
Yeah.
but it's not on something you can buy, is Philips.
Uh-huh.
Philips in Hamburg.
Yes, but that's the garnet, no?
No,
Oh, that's a terbium.
that's a terbium iron little disc, right? That's a diskette type of device, and they think
Right,
they can
right. I've seen
compete
this.
with a diskette which is 2 inches diameter.
But what about Sharp?
Sharp make a big fuss and press
And they don't
releases.
have it?
Nothing on the market.
Mm-hmm.
And Mitsubishi, but only on paper. You see releases and I haven't seen it, but the amount of work that they put in, there is a kind of KDD.
What is the total disc market?
It's supposed to be about $15 billion. Isn't that the
It's a huge.
Tough.
Yeah.
Okay.
Huge.
It was.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
I didn't
So
tell-
maybe
is the tape
if we
on?
get a tape,
I didn't tell
We
the
get the
story
tape?
about what I remember, how you explained to me
we should tell about
how
the this.
students can go on strike. There were two things, the TEEP and students going on strike.
This I don't
You were
remember.
defending students going on
This I
strike.
don't remember.
They went on strike because 2 students were expelled for cheating. And you were defending their right to cheat and they
Yes.
had the Technion.
Yeah.
And then I remember that, and I remember saying to you, students on strike. Then when in the 60s, when all the students were always
That you
going on
reminded
strike,
yourself
I was
that-
always thinking
That I was a precursor of the.
that the Technion people were a
But-
precursor of
I
going
can
on
understand the
strike.
cheating, but I can't understand anybody being expelled for it on the
That's right,
Technion.
and you were defending the students, and I remember saying,
No,
well,
they should really be thrown out if they did it in such a.
got caught.
I was going to ask you that when you were talking about your 8-hour
If-
exam, but I decided not to.
No,
do it.
but I didn't.
didn't
I
have-
didn't cheat. There was nobody to ask.
I knew you were
In fact,
going to
they
say
let
that.
me. They let me go out to have lunch.
But there was nobody to even.
Nobody to ask. I remember. Then there was-
I thought if I asked you that, you would say there was nobody there to know the right or wrong answer. The greatest
So,
I wonder if anybody read your examination.
Good.
so
Well,
shalom. And so, if I get a tape, can one get a tape of that?
What?
Give me your address. Give me your address of
TV.
your daughter
I will make
in
copies.
Cupertino.
I'll give
Yes.
you a
What
car.
this
I'll
would
leave
be
you.
a cassette.
But you probably will be there.
A cassette that goes
I'll
to
be
what?
there, but
To
I
a
will
video?
be
A videotape.
Ah, I see. Maybe what? תשמע, מספיק אחד, דוד.
I'll send you something. The electronic copy of the Weizmann Institute. I'll send you.
רגע,
But the catch is-
it's enough to have one.
Yes.
I don't have a video.
I will not have my.
You know, if
I'll be sending one to Vicky.
you want to see Lane Fry when
Reason.
Yeah, you can look at that.
She has a monitor.
Yes.
Monitor.
Okay.
These pals.
That's not personal.
The theory has to be
Yeah, I
right.
can see that, but I didn't up to.
The theory has to be right.
No, I didn't say that. I have a phone.
What the question we have is how long?
Well, we met her a few times.
Oh,
Yes.
I think she's
In
gonna
fact, it's a
be
very
like an
important-
actor.
Yeah, I met her.
If you do it properly now,
She-
then you
The one who had seized her.
it will last
a
for
friend of Yael
practically
works-
ever. But now that you get an independent result, the answer has tape.
Yes.
Okay,
How
they
long
will
How long without tape?
Will the archives last?
If you want to store them forever.
The expert on data.
No, but I gave them an answer.
Listen, if you say it after a
What is
lifetime, we'll
the
never
video?
know if you're
How
right
sure
or
you-
wrong.
Anybody know how long videotape will last?
Well, I don't know. I don't
Well,
know.
You'll
Well,
never see.
This is
But-
high density, very high density recording.
I gave them an answer. And
Certainly
usually-
more. If you don't do anything better, then just put them in boxes and you put them somewhere. A few years, certainly. No, we have to.
But what about the order of 100 years?
No,
Nobody knows.
Okay, so
My suspicion. Look, if that.
I can't listen.
We should work out some.
I think if you handle them properly, they would all forever, practically. And of course, if you put them in a furnace,
No, they stick together.
okay, then it's
that's the
problems. I mean, somebody comes in and like here at the Weizmann Institute, walks to Shirley Weisler's house, and with two guys with a mask in the night, and they want to rob her.
Is that true?
That's what David told me right now. And I can tell you that they broke into my house. Okay, so if you consider things like this, from a magnetic point of view, shelf life,
Air conditioning? Really?
Now, you see, it's
The
like
cooler it is.
tell me, the bed sheets at home. How long will they last in the company? That's the same
The
question.
same
You have to
question.
aerate, you know. You have to aerate, the bugs don't get in. And it's
Look, the magnetic, I'll tell you,
There is the question of print throws, but these are only if you have large fluctuations
in temperature. Yeah. No, I think the other problems like stealing and fire, etc., are much worse than that of the magnetic loss. Unless you keep them.
But if you put them into a bank vault, they're not going to last 100 years.
It depends what happens. The plastic will stick together,
That's
fair enough.
All right.
All right. So, I know nothing about the plastic. The magnetic, from a magnetic point of view, you keep it at a slightly lower temperature.
Yeah.
I don't think.
Plastics expert. Right. If on a disc will last forever. A magnetic disc, because nothing. Yeah, the surface
Not the magnetic.
Don't the particles come out? I don't know.
in a magnetic disc. Again, if mechanically
If it's
that's
not
not well.
moving, shelf life.
By attrition, just
Attrition from what? The temperature.
You need
right?
energy to.
you have a temperature, you have 25 degrees centigrade, you have a little bit of humidity, you have a little bit
I can tell you,
mechanics
look,
of it. It's the mechanical.
but I myself have tapes that of Ilan when he was 4 years old or so. It's now 20 years.
Yeah. Not video.
Not video. Audio.
Audio tape.
Yes.
What?